Hello everyone. In this video, I am going to give a brief introduction on Western philosophy. So, let us start. Wonder is said to be the origin of philosophy. In the early human life on this planet, when man was struck with wonder at the natural phenomena or when he found complex and conflicting phenomena in life and was filled with discontentment at the existing order of things, it was the beginning of philosophy. While the philosophy of Vedas began in wonder, the philosophy of Gautam Buddha began in discontentment with the miserable world. In the West, the early beginning of philosophy was in wonder, while the modern Western philosophy had its origin in doubt. This wonder and doubt gave rise to several types of problems. Some examples of the philosophical problems are: what is the real nature of man? What is the end of this life? What is the nature of this world in which he lives? Is there any creator of this world? These are some of the many problems taken at random which we find agitating the human mind in every land from the very dawn of civilization. Western philosophy has removed, more or less true to the etymological meaning of philosophy, in being essentially an intellectual quest for truth. In the history of Western philosophy, we find that as human knowledge about each of the different problems mentioned above began to grow, it became impossible for the same man to study everything about every problem. Division of labor or specialization became necessary, and a group of men devoted themselves to a particular problem or a few connected problems. There came into existence in this way the different special sciences: physics, chemistry, botany, anatomy, geology, and similar sciences took up each a part or aspect of the world of nature. Psychology, anatomy, and the other medical sciences devoted themselves to the different problems of the human body. Psychology began to study the problems of the human mind. The detailed study of many of particular problems with which philosophical speculation originally started became thus the subject matter of the special sciences. Philosophy then began to depend on the reports of the investigation made by the different sciences, tried to understand their meanings and implications critically, and utilized these results for understanding the general nature of the universe, man, nature, and God. Historians of philosophy have divided Western philosophy according to their convenience. We shall divide the Western philosophy into Greek, medieval, modern, post-Kantian, metaphysicians, and the 20th century philosophy. First one is Greek philosophy, ancient philosophy. It covers a period between 600 to 400 AD. This period has three sections. Section 1, Pre-Socratic philosophy. Section 2, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Section 3, Greco-Roman philosophy. Medieval philosophy, the period from 400 to 1500 AD. Modern philosophy, Bacon to Kant, post-Kantian philosophy, and 20th century philosophy. Western philosophy has a long history, conventionally divided into four large areas: the ancient, medieval, modern, and contemporary. The first stage is ancient stage of philosophy. Western philosophy is generally said to begin in the Greek cities of Western Asia Minor with Thales of Miletus, who was active around 585 BC and left us the opaque dictum, "All is water." His most noted students were Anaximenes of Miletus and Anaximander. Other thinkers and schools appeared throughout Greece over the next couple of centuries. Among the most important were Heraclitus, Anaxagoras, the pluralist and atomist, the Eleatics, Parmenides, and Zeno, and the sophist. The next stage is the medieval stage of philosophy. Medieval philosophy was greatly concerned with the nature of God and the application of Aristotle's logic and thought to every area of life. One continuing interest in this time was to prove the existence of God through logic alone if possible. One early effort was the cosmological argument, conventionally attributed to Thomas Aquinas. The argument, roughly, is that everything that exists has a cause, but since there could not be an infinite chain of causes back into the past, there must have been an uncaused first cause, this is God. Aquinas also adapted this argument to prove the goodness of God. Everything has some goodness, and the cause of each thing is better than the thing caused. Therefore, the first cause is the best possible thing. Similar arguments were used to prove God's power and uniqueness. The third stage is the modern stage of philosophy. As with many periodizations, there are multiple current uses for the term modern philosophy that exist in practice. One usage is to date modern philosophy from the age of reason, where systematic philosophy became common, excluding Erasmus and Machiavelli as modern philosophers. The 18th century philosophy article deals with the period often called the early part of the Enlightenment in the shorter form of the word and centers on the rise of systematic empiricism following after Sir Isaac Newton's natural philosophy. The 19th century took the radical notions of self-organization and intrinsic order and proceeded to produce a long elaboration on the tension between systematization and organic development. The fourth stage is the contemporary stage of philosophy. The 20th century deals with the upheavals produced by a series of conflicts within philosophical discourse over the basis of knowledge, with classical certainties overthrown and new social, economic, scientific, and logical problems. 20th century philosophy was set for a series of attempts to reform and preserve and to alter or abolish older knowledge systems. A notable phenomenon of the latter half of the century was the rise of popular philosophers who promulgated systems for dealing with the world but were isolated from academic philosophy, such as Ayn Rand, who were radical critics of traditional philosophy and psychology and relied on unorthodox methods. The 21st century's philosophy is difficult to clarify due to the short span of time that has lapsed since the start of the new millennium. Only nearly one decade has passed since its beginning. However, it is usually seen as being defined by the prominent 20th century philosophers who still survive today. So, this was about the basic concepts of Western philosophy.